All right, everyone. Thanks for your patience. We are ready now for the Helen Maroulis and Brendan Buckley press conference in advance of the Final X New York and Beat the Streets event going on next Wednesday. It's coming already, June 8th at the Hulu Theater. Helen's competing for the 7th time in the 12 years that we've done this event. She's, of course, a 2016 gold medalist, 2020 bronze medalist. And we'll remember we have an on-site press conference on June 7th, Tuesday at the Hulu Theater. Helen will be there along with the other 29 athletes. All 30 athletes will be there for the press conference, 1 to 4 p.m. I'm going to separately send you some details on that. Look for that in your inbox in a little bit. If you want permission to record, just put a little note in the chat if you haven't already done so, and I will give you permission to record this file. And then if you have a question, the best way is to go down into the bottom where it says reactions and click on the little raise hand function, and we'll get you questions answered in as many as we can. We have till the top of the hour. And first, I want to ask Helen, we mentioned at the top that you've competed now. It can be 7 of these. What does this event and the Beat the Streets and your support of it mean to you?
So Beat the Streets is an amazing organization, and I've gotten to work with them not only through the benefits, but even with coaching education. And now I'm on the board for Beat the Streets DC, and I've done camps and clinics for different Beat the Streets organizations all over the country. And I can just say that it's always such an incredible experience. The coaches, the staff, and the services that they provide to the children, not just on the mat, but off the mat, help as well with like college prep and everything. They do so much, and it's really life-changing for these kids. So it's great to be able to give back and to be a part of that.
Great. And Helen's had a lot of success in these events as well. All right, we're going to start with our first question, and it's going to be Dylan Boker.
Hey there, Helen. I appreciate you making some time.
Hey, Dylan. Thank you.
I'm just curious because I was noticing that, Chris Pratt was working on a documentary piece centered around you with religion of sports and reserve entertainment. Can you offer some insights into that? Because that sounds really cool.
Yeah. So this documentary came about, I think, a couple of years ago. In 2018 was when I first met the director, Dylan, and through Andrea, who's now one of the producers. And they just kind of talked about maybe following my journey through Tokyo and covering the concussion and the injuries and just kind of the human experience of being broken down and coming back to sports. So it was an incredible experience. And just to have Religion of Sport and Chris Pratt and Reserve Entertainment, everyone, these like great people and companies be a part of it was so cool. I'm happy that I didn't know the extent until after Tokyo. They like kind of downplayed everything. And then after Tokyo, when I met everyone, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a big project.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned the injury issues and stuff you were going through. I mean, such great longevity in the sport. I mean, 15 world/Olympic teams. Like, how cathartic is it to move beyond some of those injury issues and just get back to doing what you're clearly passionate about?
Oh my gosh, I can't even put into words how just wonderful it feels to get to pursue wrestling and to pursue sport. I would say like how I used to before the injuries, but I think it's even better now since then because I understand my body better, and I've learned just healthy boundaries for myself, and I've just gotten to know myself better, and especially how training needs to look like as I'm getting older. And so I really love the way that I'm pursuing sport now. I love the people that I'm around, and it's great.
Yeah, awesome to hear that. Thanks so much for the insights, Helen.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Next up is Laurie Ayers. Laurie.
I'll echo what Dylan said. Just say thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us today. I have 2 questions. First one, simple. What excites you about wrestling at the Beat the Streets Final X event next week? What gets you excited about it?
Well, I think first, New York City is just always just such an electric place to be and to compete in Madison Square Garden. And then I've done these the Beat the Street benefit competitions before, and there's just, I don't know, there's just something about it. It's like there's an energy, there's an excitement. A lot of people that watch wrestling come see it, and you always have great foreign competitors, and now obviously we have great matchups for going for the world team spot. So it's incredible. It's going to be a blast. I think that's what excites me.
I think we're all excited. Thank you. Next question though. Okay, so there's a strong history, Helen, you know it, of fierce women's directors at the Beat the Streets New York City chapter. We have Jackie Davis, Emma Randall, now Becca Leathers. We know now that Emma Randall is the head coach at the NYC RTC. So we're seeing a lot more opportunities for women at RTCs, a lot of things happening for women in the city of New York City. Through Beat the Streets, now through the RTC there. How important do you think it is to continue to develop training opportunities for females at RTCs, and how has the RTCs helped your training?
Oh, I think it's incredibly important to have females come into that leadership position, especially in RTCs. It's going to help to continue to grow the sport, and I think it just brings a different element to provide that for young girls to just have a women's coach. And I know I've been blessed by many great women's coaches, and Emma's been my coach before, and Clarissa Chun, and they've now moved on to college programs or RTCs. So it's extremely important. And the second question was about RTCs. I've been probably at like 4 or 5 RTCs now, and I love the experience. I think I'll always stay at an RTC. I like that its focus is on the Olympic level wrestling, and in that sense, it can focus more on the women as well. And it's in conjunction with the college program, so it kind of just like basically everyone gets to benefit from it, and we can all help each other through that. So I think it's amazing that they created the RTCs, and it's really if you look at the U.S. men and women's success over the last couple of years, you can see that it's definitely had a positive impact.
Thanks so much, Helen. Good luck.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Just a reminder, if you do have a question, just go to that reactions tab down at the bottom and do the raise hand function. And next up is Earl Smith. Earl.
Hey, Helen, I just wanted you to kind of compare and contrast this year from 2018, when you were slated to wrestle in Final X and you had to wrestle off at a later date. You weren't in Final X 2019. So just, your training situation, mentally, physically, everything leading up to this event.
Yeah, I mean, I really just treat this like any other, world team spot tournament. I call it the second most important tournament of the year. The first for me is World Championships, but I mean, this is basically right there with it, because you got to win this to be able to go to the World Championships. So the training, the preparation, everything's basically been the same. I kind of know my routine and what works for me. So I've just been sticking to that plan.
Thanks, Helen.
Awesome. Thank you. Next up is Crystal Hart. Hi, Crystal.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, what I wanted to ask you is that right now I'm in the Pennsylvania, Ohio area, and some of the girls on the wrestling team wanted to know in the beginning what brought you into the sport. And also, do you feel that there are a lot more opportunities for girls in wrestling today than when you started?
Yeah. So first, what got me into my sport, honestly, was my brothers. So my little brother had joined the team, and so the coach just told my mom to bring him back next year, and my mom didn't want to do that, so she told me to jump in there and be my brother's dummy. And after about 2 weeks, all the hard work, I went to my parents and I said, this isn't fair. I'm doing everything the boys are doing, but they get to compete and I don't. And so my dad made a bet with me that I could wrestle one match, and if I won that match, I could keep wrestling. And that was the only match I won all year. So I definitely call it fate. And then what do I see the difference, the growth for women's wrestling since when I started? When I started wrestling, I was 7 years old, but there were, I think, maybe 4 or 5 states out of 50 that had women's state sanctioned wrestling. Maryland wasn't one of them at the time. I think now we're at 37 out of 50, which is pretty incredible. And, there's still a ways to go, but yeah, it's tremendous. Girls are getting more opportunities, traveling overseas. There's more competitions in the US. And I think just overall, the perception of women's wrestling has been more positive, where when I was growing up, it was still like we just didn't belong. And we were kind of like the outcast of the sport. And we really had to kind of fight for our spot or for respect. And I think that's changed a lot.
Do you think Title IX helped that quite a bit? I know the United States Postal Service just put out a Title IX stamp. Do you think that it had helped, even the scoreboard between the men and the women in a sport like this?
I think Title IX definitely helped women's sports tremendously. And I think it just shed light on the discrepancies between them for gender. I would say that for wrestling, title, it seemed to impact wrestling in a way that maybe some of the programs felt that women's, I don't know. I would have hoped that more wrestling programs would have added a women's program to help with that. And that just kind of wasn't the case over the last couple decades since Title IX's been around. But I think that we are now seeing a shift where, you know, you look at the University of Iowa, where they're starting to add women's wrestling and, you know, D1's program, top, what's no, what's it called? Big Ten. Sorry. So I think just kind of having that and seeing those changes is going to be very positive.
Well, thank you. Hey, just to end, are you concerned at all in such a competitive sport with the pandemic, or you've been through so many hurdles with the concussion, maybe you're just ready to get back to form?
I'm back. I've been back to form, and I think I'm actually kind of better than I was before, and I think I'll continue to grow and evolve. The pandemic was definitely serious and had to take that seriously, and we're very cautious about it, but we had great NGB and great organization, and even the IOC and the Olympic Committee, everyone did everything to put on a great games and a safe games, and I think that, you know, we just treated it with caution.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Great. And, you know, following up on that before we get to the next question, I wanted to ask Brendan Buckley, the executive director of Beat the Streets, about Helen, just having Helen as part of this event and having been back to it so many times and such a great representative of the sport. What does that do for the Beat the Streets event, having someone like Helen involved?
Well, Beat the Streets New York loves Helen as a person first and as a competitor next. But Helen's always been there for us, wrestled in numerous events. We were even grateful to have her. In 2020, we had to cancel our annual benefit, and we were trying to come up with a concept where we knew we wanted to have matches. We weren't sure if we could pull that off, but what would be like a unique and novel concept. And so we came up with this idea of sort of doing like an old school telethon where we have different speakers. And so Helen, actually, some of them were patched in over Zoom or Skype. And then we did some in-person interviews on the site overlooking the Hudson River. So Helen came up and it was fantastic. Our MC was Sally Ann Roberts, and we were, you know, grateful to have them and have a presence of Wrestle Like a Girl and women's wrestling and just talk about our history. And that's something Beat the Streets takes very seriously in terms of we were the first of its kind to have like girls only wrestling. So as Helen can certainly tell you about her experience wrestling with boys growing up, we really took a stance several years ago that we were going to have a girls only wrestling league. We were able to build it into New York City's wrestling season. So in the winter, New York City wrestlers compete in Section 12. That's the New York City section for New York State championships. But then in the spring, we have a girls only league with 30 teams. So that's still pretty unique. But the fact that we did that, I think, really helped us become pioneers in a lot of ways for leading that. So being Final X, this is our first time hosting this format. We take a lot of pride at Beat the Streets and running a stellar event, and one with a lot of production value where the athletes are excited and our donors are excited. We incorporate our student athletes and our parents and alumni and coaches. We'll be handing out coaches awards. So, you know, our partnership with USA Wrestling and athletes and stars like Helen, it just means the world to us. And our kids, at the end of the day, are the reason that we do this, the reason we hold this benefit. And to have somebody like Helen as a role model for our girls just means a lot to us. So we appreciate Helen always being there for us at Beat the Streets.
Awesome. Brendan, thanks so much. Next up, Kyle Klingman. Kyle?
Helen, how has your life changed since winning an Olympic gold medal?
You know, it's interesting. In some aspects it changed a lot, and then some aspects it hasn't changed at all. So, I mean, here I am, I don't know, 5-6 years later, and I'm just still wrestling, still doing the same training preparations and diet that that I did a couple years ago. But then life outside of wrestling has been different as well. A lot of really cool opportunities come with that gold medal, and I've just gotten to meet a lot of new people and just get to do things that I probably wouldn't have been able to have otherwise. So it's been really a great journey.
Awesome. Thank you. Next up, Alex Azzi on her turf.
Hey, Helen, thank you so much for taking the time. Curious, I guess a two-part question. Back in Tokyo last summer, at what point did you know that you were going to keep competing after the Olympics?
I honestly I had such a rough time getting back to the mat, and I had such a rough, the whole summer was just really rough preparations as far as like the way my wrestling was going and psychologically and mentally. So, I mean, really the day before Tokyo, I just remember thinking this is the last tournament that I'll ever wrestle. And it hasn't been great or what I would like it to be over the last couple months, but you know what, I just want to enjoy this tournament one last time. And then something just clicked, and I just went out there and kind of wrestled like my old self in the way that I used to. And then once I finally got that back, which I think I was just waiting to get back this whole time since the injuries, it was like, well, why retire now? Like I did all this work to get this back, and I finally got it back. So I'm just going to keep going, and we'll see what happens. So honestly, it was kind of like right after Tokyo that I thought I might keep going.
And then obviously, because of the Olympic postponement, you had the World Championships just a couple of weeks later. Can you fill in kind of what the blanks looked like, have both between that period of Olympics and Worlds, and then also since then? Have you had any time off, or has it just been training full time?
Yeah, so I think that I was in a different boat than everyone else, because honestly, for like in 2018, 2019, and really a lot through 2020, I felt like I'd missed out on most of the whole wrestling quadrennial. And so I think everyone else, it felt like a 5-year quad for them. And so I think some people were maybe like kind of tired and tapped out and really needing a break. Whereas for me, it was the opposite. It was like everything finally came together in 2021. So I didn't feel like I needed a break. I was super excited to go to the World Championships. I went to Greece for like a small holiday in between that. And then I went again and lived there for a couple months after, and that worked out amazing because I didn't want to take time off from training. And the Japanese Olympic champion actually flew out to Greece and trained with me for about 3 weeks. So I just kind of kept the ball rolling, and then just have kind of just competing ever since.
That was Risako Kawai. I might not pronounce his name.
So that was Mukaida.
Okay. Cool. Thank you, Helen.
Thanks.
All right, thank you, Alex. Just a reminder, if you want to ask a question, go down to the reactions tab there and click on the raise hand. And also, if you want a recording of this, just let me know in the chat or send me an email, and I'll make sure to send you a recording when it's rendered. Next up, Derek Levendusky. Derek.
Hey, Helen. The first question is a follow-up to something you said earlier. You mentioned that your training has changed as you got older. Can you describe what some of those changes are?
Yeah, I think that I would say that I'm just more mindful of kind of my body and my health. I think as you get older, there's just could be a lot more nagging dings and bruises. And so just knowing when to pull back and maybe not having to stick to like an exact extreme perfect schedule. So I move a lot of stuff. I do a lot more therapies, probably for every practice. I think I do like 1 or 2 therapies to counterbalance that workout. And yeah, I probably don't do as much live. And I just think as you get older, there's some things that you maybe don't need. I think when you're younger, you need to do a lot of live, you need a lot of feels, you need a lot of experience, maybe go over, repeat a lot. As you get older, you don't really need that. It's more like kind of sharpening things when it gets close to competition. And other than that, just staying healthy and in a good shape.
Thanks for answering that. Next question is, during your injury recovery, which seemed to be pretty lengthy season, can you talk about what role faith and family played in your return to the mat?
Yeah, so faith and family had a huge impact in my life and in helping me to return to the mat and just overall healing. I would say
She was over there a minute ago.
More so than coming back to the mat. And I remember going home from 2019, and just not really wanting my parents to kind of see me in the state that I was in and where I was at with struggling with the concussion stuff. And they just saw through it and they said, just come move home and come live with us and we'll help get you doctors and get you healthy. And so, and then COVID happened shortly after that. So it was just really nice to have my and just have them help me through that time. And then my faith always, I depend on that. I relied on that. I prayed through a bunch of things and I leaned heavily on the word for just kind of, I guess, guidance on whether to return and when to return and how to return.
Thanks, Helen.
Great. Thank you, Derek. Next up, Kyle Klingman.
Helen, how often do young girls reach out to you with questions about your career, asking advice, or just telling you that your story inspired them? And when you do get those, how do you respond?
I would say that I don't think I get a lot of like public comments as much about that stuff. I mean, some nice things, but as far as like it's crazy how often I'll hear or get messages that girls are in a program where the guys or the coach doesn't want them there, or they're like still struggling with that gender bias. And basically they're asking like, how did you get through it? Or how did some of the other wrestlers get through it? And then I definitely get asked more often now about injuries and coming back from injuries. And so I've spoken publicly about it and I've done some posts about it. And I definitely respond back to the messages. I'm not going to lie. I'm not like, I have social media presence, but I'm not on it all the time. And I don't go through like a lot of the messages, but I feel like I see stuff when it comes up and I try to always respond to that. So, and basically all you can just do is share your experience, or I recommend some of the treatments or the therapies that I've done. And I've connected a lot of athletes with that. And so I'm excited because the documentary is going to talk a lot about that too. And it will explain some of the therapies and treatments probably better than I could. And so, yeah, hopefully people will have more resources of things that can help.
All right. Thanks, Kyle. If there's no other questions, we'll conclude. Want to thank everyone for, we have one more, Alex Azy. Hold on, here comes Alex.
Sorry, Helen, I wanted to ask just one follow-up. You mentioned that in the lead up to Tokyo, you were dealing with just a lot of challenges. I think it was an MCL issue you had at trials, but could you just kind of shine some light on what that period looked like for you?
Yeah, so basically I just wasn't really ever the same since the concussions. And the MCL being torn, that was really affecting my wrestling. But I think that was also just triggering to just maybe some psychological stuff and fears and just about coming back. And, I just wanted to wrestle free. Like I just wanted to wrestle the way that I used to, where I'm not having to like protect this part of my body or watch out for this or make sure this doesn't hurt after, or like I just wanted to go out there and compete and do what I love. And then it just became this really kind of more psychological, emotional battle because it wasn't happening, and it had been a struggle for so long that it was just hard to imagine that I could get out of that. And so I think the journey going into Tokyo was just trying to overcome maybe that lack of belief and just trust that things would come together in the end. And that really honestly kind of happened right at the last minute. So
since winning that bronze medal in Tokyo, have you had any of those same like psychological struggles, or was that kind of a turning point for you?
I think that honestly was the turning point. And there were a lot of little moments along the way that helped with that, especially moving out to Arizona and just getting connected with like different therapies and treatments out there. And just one by one, things just started chipping away. But Tokyo was really the main turning point. And then I don't think there's really been anything since.
Well, thanks for the extra info.
All right. And one more question coming now from Crystal Hart. Crystal. Did we lose you? I think I lost Crystal. I think that's my fault. She might pop back in. I think I clicked the wrong thing.
She's muted.
Oh, there she is. I think I have to unmute her. My fault.
There, you got it there?
There we go. My fault. Yep.
Okay, hey, I wanted to ask you, because you brought up gender bias. What are your feelings now with the transgenders coming, the swim communities had a lot of different problems. How would you feel about transgenders and wrestling against women?
Yeah, I mean, I personally would not compete against a transgender athlete just because I've had concussions and I've been injured by a grown man before, and I'm just not willing to put myself in that position to do so. And I think that you know, we definitely want to create a space for transgender athletes to have the ability to participate in sport, but I think that the women's division should just solely be for women, and the men's division should solely be for men, and maybe we can find a way to create something where the transgender athletes could compete against each other, and if that league continues to grow, then they would have those opportunities.
Thank you.
All right, again, I want to thank everyone for participating today, particularly Helen and Brendan, and look forward to seeing you next week. And hopefully everyone will come out next week to the press conference, June 7th, Tuesday at the Hulu Theater, 1 to 4 p.m. I've included in the chat the lineup release, the credentials form, if you haven't done that yet. If you need a recording of this, let me know. If you haven't already done so in the chat, I'll send a recording out. And I look forward to seeing everyone next week. Helen, thanks so much. We'll see you next week.
Thank you. Take
Thanks,
care.
everybody.
You guys.